Hi guys, today we're going to do Unit 7, and I'm breaking Section 4 into two parts. So today we're just going to do multiplying radicals, just distributing, and tomorrow we're going to be FOILing radicals. So let's look at what you have to do to multiply radicals. Let's name it that, multiply radical expressions. Okay, the big key here to remember is that you're always going to do the outside of the radical, the number on the outside times whatever's on the outside, inside times inside, and then you always have to simplify. Okay? So let's start with a couple just basic examples and we'll go from there. So example. If we had the square root of 5 times the square root of 15. Now you have to go back to, we've talked about this many, many times, there's always those invisible ones floating around in Algebra 1. If it's not written there, it's usually an invisible one. So we do have on the outside of these radicals, there is a number and it's 1. Okay, we don't necessarily have to write that, but it's there. So if we were going to do this and we were going to go outside times outside, it would be 1 times 1. And then inside times inside will be 5 times 15. Now the reason I'm not multiplying 5 times 15 is I'm going to eventually need to simplify that. So instead of doing 5 times 15 and then splitting it apart into the prime factors, I'm just going to immediately split it into prime factors. So the 5 from above, and then I'm going to take that 15 and I'm going to split it into 3 times 5. Now we still have that 1 out front if you want to write it, or you can leave it blank. Now what I mean by inside times inside and then simplify, now we have to jailbreak. If there's anything in there that can come out, we have to make sure we bring it out or you're going to lose points. It's like leaving a fraction of 2/4. That doesn't feel complete because it's not. We haven't simplified it all the way. So we have to simplify it all the way. So in this case, we have a pair of 5s that can make their great escape. Remember, something happens on the way out and only one of them makes them out. We had the 1 outside waiting. 5 is now on the outside and 3 gets left behind. So my answer to this is 5 root 3. Now I took a lot of steps to get there and I'm going to shorten that up as we go, but that's how we multiply and then simplify. Okay, so let's try another one. And I'm going to try to pause between steps so you can kind of try some on your own. So we have the square root of 6 times 2 square root of 3. What's on the outside of that square root of 6? Think about it. And you should realize there's an invisible 1 here. Now remember the rules. Outside times outside, inside times inside. I'm going to take a little shortcut here. I'm going to say, well, 1 times 2 is just 2. So I'm going to write that. I'm not going to actually write 1 times 2. And then I'm going to take another shortcut. I'm going to split 6 up on the way over here. So instead of writing 6, well, let me switch it to a color that we can see. Instead of writing the 6, I'm going to write 2 times 3. There's my 6. Instead of writing the 3, well, 3 can't be split up, so I'm just going to write the 3. Okay, that kind of shortens up your steps a little bit. Now I want you to stop and pause and think about it. What numbers here could escape from the radical and be on the outside? So in this case, we have a pair of 3s. If we have a pair of 3s, that means an escape can occur. There's nothing on that 2 because the 2's on the inside and the other 2's on the outside, so they're not really can't interact. So we have our 2 that's waiting on the outside. I always call that our visitor. We have the 3's that escape. Something horrible happens and only one of them makes it out. And then left behind is a 2. And so my final answer here would be 6 root 2. So notice I kind of shortened up the steps a little bit. You could even shorten it further if you can do some of this in your head. That's probably as short as I'm going to go for now. Let's try number 3. Number 3 is 3 root 7 times 2 root 14. Pause the video here and see if you can kind of get to the final answer. See if you can get all the way to the right answer. Okay? Hopefully you pause and you have the right answer and you can kind of go quickly to the end of this, but outside times outside is 3 times 2. Inside times inside is 7 times 14. 14 can be split into 7 times 2. We have a 3 times 2 on the outside. 7's escape, leaving the 2 behind. Something horrible happens to the 7's on the way out. And we have a 2 left behind. And then we just multiply what's on the outside. 3 times 2 times 7. And that's 42 root 2. Did you get it right? If you did, put a giant star next to it. You know what you're doing. Okay, so let's add some letters to this fun situation. Okay, number 4. Root x times root x times y. Try that one. I bet you can figure it out. Pause it, see what you can do. Again, on the outside of this is just invisible 1. So we could write the 1 if we want to, but we don't have to. On the inside, we have x, and then we have x times y. Well, can something escape here? Yeah, something can escape. We can have our x's escape. The y's left behind. There's a 1 on the outside waiting to multiply by x, but what's 1 times x is simply x and root y. And that's our final answer. Did you get that one right? Draw even better star, maybe 2 stars. Okay? All right, now we're going to take this one step further today, and we're going to use the distributive property. Okay? We're going to use the distributive property to multiply. So we're going to use what I just taught you and what you know about distributive property. We're still going to do outside times outside, inside times inside, and simplify, but we have to distribute if we have parentheses. So let's do 3 of these together. So the first one, the square root of 2, parenthesis, square root of 3 plus the square root of 5, close parentheses. Remember, those parentheses tell you whatever's on the outside has to be distributed to everything on the inside. Most of you know that, and when I see that mistake on your paper, it's just that you get going too fast and you forgot. So be careful with these, okay? So I'm going to do root 2 times root 3. And this first one, I'm going to write everything out. So root 2 times root 3. Then I'm going to add, and I'm going to multiply root 2 times 5. So root 2 times root 5. So now what I have is root 2 times root 3 plus root 2 times root 5. Now remember the rules of multiplying. Outside times outside, inside times inside. So the outside of these are just understood ones. So you can write the 1 if you want. On the inside, we have 2 times 3. That's my first one. Plus, again, we have a 1 on the outside, and then 2 times 5. Now looking on the inside, these are 2 separate terms. Please remember what we talked about as terms. This is a term, and it's completely separate from this term over the second term. We can't put these 2 together because they don't have the same thing on the inside. Okay, remember we learned about adding, they have to be on the inside the same. In both the purple and the green case here, in both issues, there's nothing that can escape. So really what we end up with root 6 plus root 10, and that's it. There's nothing more I can do with that. That's my final answer. Okay, but I always want to check to see if there is something that can be simplified. All right, let's try number 2. Number 2 is going to be root 5, parenthesis, root 15 minus 2 root 10. Now this time I'm going to take one step out of it. I'm going to go root 5 times root 15, and I'm going to put that in 1. There's a 1's on the outside, so I don't need to put them out there. And then I'm going to subtract, and again, you could put a 1 out there, that's fine too. And I'm going to multiply root 5 times 2 root 10. Now the 2 is on the outside, so the 2 remains on the outside. And then on the inside we have 5 times 10. Now if you noticed, I could have prime factored, but I'm going to prime factor on the next step. I'm going to say, well, in this pink one, the first radical is 5 times, and then I'm going to split that 15 into 5 times 3 to see if there's anything that can simplify. And then I'm going to subtract 2 root 5, and I'm going to split that 10 up. to 2 and 5. Now I'm going to look for escapes. Okay, in the first one, we have a pair of 5s, which means the 5s can escape, and the 3 is left over. In the second one, we have a 2 on the outside. Again, the 5s can escape. It doesn't matter whether they're next to each other. There's still a pair inside. They're going to escape, and a 2 is left over. So then what we have in this section is 10 root 2. Again, these two can't go together because the root 2 and the root 3 are two different types of radicals, and so we cannot put them together. So that's my final answer. Let's try one more. Now this is a challenge one, so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to write it down, and then I want you to pause it and see how far you can get on your own. See if you can get to the final answer. If you get it wrong, you know you learned very well from your own mistakes. We've talked about that. So 2 root 3, parenthesis, 4 root 12, plus 5 root 6, close parenthesis. So pause the video here, see if you can get the right answer, at least close to the right answer. So here's what you would do. We have a 2 times 4 on the outside, so that's 8. On the inside, we have a 3 and a 12 that can be split into 2 times 2 times 3. There's my 12 right here, okay? Then I have to distribute that again. 2 times 5 on the outside is 10, root 3, and then 6 can be split into 2 times 3. So you might want to pause there and think about where did those numbers go, because I skipped a bunch of steps there. See if you can figure out where did the 12 go? Where did the 3 go? How did I get an 8 on the outside? Okay, now I'm going to simplify. Well, in this first one, we have a pair of 2s that can escape, and we have a pair of 3s that escape. Now, just in case you didn't know, if everything escapes from the prison, the radical prison, it collapses. It's no longer there. So really what we have here is 8 times 3 times 2, because the 3's escaped, and then the 2's escaped. Okay, and the 8 was the visitor waiting on the outside. Okay, now in the second radical, someone does get left behind in the second radical. We have a 3 and a 3. And waiting outside is the 10. So the 10's on the outside, the 3's come together and escape, we don't know what happens, and 2 is left behind. Okay, so our final answer here, let's see if you got it right, is 8 times 3 times 2. Well, 8 times 3 times 2 is 48, plus 10 times 3 is 30, and your root 2 is there. There's your final answer. Here's the question, did you get it right? And if you didn't get it right, can you find your mistake? If you can find your mistake, you're making really strong connections in understanding this material.